So to put some numbers to this, 12% of people, according to the stats that are listening right now, are explicitly unsatisfied with their job, which means they hate it. 85% of workers globally are disengaged, meaning they're not fully invested or happy at work. So it's a huge number of people. More than half of the US workers are at least somewhat satisfied, but engagement remains worryingly low. So if we look at that 85% number, 85% of workers globally are disengaged, meaning not fully invested or happy at work. So it's really those people.
And the thing is, it's not just enough to be unhappy at work. That's one piece of it. The unhappiness can be a symptom, and one of the causes can be that you have a different calling in life, and you are not following your calling. Now, sometimes for someone like Bill Gates, for example, and Paul Allen, they figured out their calling, and they just went, right? For many of us, it may not be that easy. So what we have to do is we have to try a few things. You try on different shoes to see what fits. And so, have some thought experiments, talk to your friends, say, okay, I'm a UPS driver, this is what I do, and I really like playing the guitar, or I like to make these art figurines or something at home and whatever else, right? So you have to figure out what your calling is. And I'm probably not the best person to tell you how to figure out what the calling is. Maybe another guest of yours can help them with that.
Do you think everyone has a calling?
Yeah, I think we are all unique children of God. And I think we all have some music we want to get out. And knowing what that is and getting it out may not be the easiest thing, but it's a worthwhile journey to try to get there, right? So we can't do this just because we're dissatisfied, and we can't do this just because we want to make money and get rich. We've got to have something that we think the world would be interested in. And in my case, I'd gone through this session with a couple of industrial psychologists, and they told me, Mohnish, you like to play games. You're a game player. And actually, they couldn't be more accurate. So when I was doing my startup, I'm a numbers guy and a math guy, so I actually like that. So what I used to do is, because I had no money, I used to send 200 letters a week to the senior IT people at 200 different companies. But what I did is, so all these people I was sending this letter to, they had a gatekeeper, some secretary, etc., whose job was to not let anything through. And my whole purpose was, I need this letter to get through. It needs to get through the gatekeeper. So I was using mail merge, which was mass producing these letters, but there was a customization, the mail word, where if some person's name was David Smith, it said, Dear Dave. Okay. And then throughout the letter, it talked Dave. Dave's name came up like 3-4 times. When the assistant got the letter, she couldn't tell whether I know Dave or not.
Because you used his shortened name.
His shortened name, and she doesn't want to throw a letter that somebody that he knows. So the letter would go through enough times, right? Now, what I also did is 1 week after those letters were delivered, I made 200 calls. I called all 200 people. And basically, if I got voicemail, left a message, whatever else, right? Now they have entered the sales funnel. Okay, so Dave Smith is in the sales funnel. If I get no response from Dave Smith, after 1 week, there's one more call. Then the calls start getting spaced out double time, 2 weeks out, then 4 weeks out, then 8 weeks out, then 16 weeks out. But Dave never leaves that funnel, okay, until he tells me, do not bother me anymore, and I have no interest. They're going to stay in that funnel. So the second week, I send out another 200 letters, make another 200 calls. right? And now I've got the first week, second week. So you can see as time goes on, I'm calling nonstop, right? Because this thing is, but what I was tracking, because I'm a math guy, what I was tracking is, okay, these 200 letters went out. How many people did I get any kind of positive response from, right? Because not everyone's telling me to get lost, okay? And how many meetings am I having? And what is the ratio of calls to meetings, meetings to close, etc. And my ticket size of the item I was selling was very large, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? 9 months after doing this, where now let's go back here. So we're going to take our free time. So what I've tried to describe is that what I'm doing is actually more exciting than the orange. The yellow is more exciting than the orange. So basically,
what is the yellow?
The yellow is our startup.
So that's working on your startup.
So on the weekends, I'm going to do 10 hours a day because I'm not working, right? And on the weekdays, I'm going to do 4 hours a day because I've got other things to do, because I have a job and whatever else is going on. So there's my weekdays, 5 days there where I'm putting in 4 hours a day, and then I'm putting in 10 hours on the weekend. And the free time, this is not as exciting as pounding Dave. Pounding Dave continuously till he says either get off my back or here's your purchase order is very exciting. It's way more exciting than playing some social media or watching Netflix or whatever else.
Which is what people currently do with their free time.
So one of the litmus tests of whether you should be doing a startup or not is yellow needs to be more exciting than orange.
Your startup needs to be more exciting than your free time.
Netflix should be so painfully boring for you. And going on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, should be very boring for you.
Compared to?
This is exciting.
Compared to building your company.
Yes. So, the Pink Floyd song, "We Don't Need No Education."
Yeah.
We don't need no thought control.
Yeah.
We don't need none of this. This is so useless. You understand how useless this is? Yellow is where it's at. It's not in the orange stuff. We don't need this. Thank you, Stephen.
So we don't need any free time.
This is better than free time.
Building your business.
You're having an orgasm every hour. So what can be better than this?
Much of what I do here when I'm having these conversations is I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the person who is currently sat in a 9-to-5 job, and they've got an idea, and their idea hasn't really gone anywhere yet necessarily, and the pressure they're feeling in their lives is probably now a financial one. Like, they want financial freedom, they want more optionality in their lives to be able to go on holiday, make more choices, and have more freedom. If you're that person, what are the mental models that we haven't discussed yet that you need to be thinking about to get from 0 to 1?
So one of the things to keep in mind is that we live in a world now where most things that you would want to do in terms of starting a business are not capital intensive.
What does that mean?
Doesn't take much money. In fact, what's been happening over time is startups need less and less and less money because they need more and more and more brain power, right? So the good news is that a gating factor is not that you need money. When I started my business, I signed up for every credit card that would come to me. So I had 70,000 in unused credit lines in probably a dozen Visa and MasterCards, right? I had about $30,000 in my retirement account, my 401k, which I also took out. I said, 25, I can make that up later, right? So basically I had $100,000 of capital. And that 100,000 got used because once I got going, I needed working capital and so on. But then the business was actually cash flow positive. 9 months after I was doing this, I was able to get rid of this. So after 9 months, my business was producing enough cash flow that I went and resigned. Okay. And we can put that in here as well. So what happened is that I went to my boss and his boss and basically told them that I'm started a business. It's not competitive with the company, and I'm going to be leaving in 2 weeks, and this is my 2 weeks notice. And basically that was that, right? And, they sat me down and said, Mohnish, we were so confused for the last 9 months because we met several times because we saw big drop off in your performance, but it was never so low that we wanted to fire you. I said, exactly. That was exactly what I was trying to do. I was trying to say just above firing level. He said, well, you mastered it because we met several times, but we couldn't get rid of you. So what they told me is, they said, look, when your business fails, not if your business fails, when your business fails, please come back. We'll give you more money. You're going to get a promotion, and we'd love to have you back. I could immediately come back. So I said, I got one free shot.
Yeah.
Where I leave my job, I go, I do this thing, and if it doesn't work, I'm back to almost exactly where I was. Almost no change,
so
right?
Amazon's type 1, type 2 decision-making.
Yeah.
Idea.
And this is not just me. What risk does Bill Gates take? Okay, Bill Gates, what is his value as a Harvard freshman in the job market? 0. Okay, nobody would pay him anything. And he could come back anytime and finish that degree. So let's say he went to New Mexico. Things didn't work out. He's got wealthy parents in Seattle. Okay, he just comes back, graduates a year later, and he goes on. So what was the risk? There was no risk. And if you study entrepreneur after entrepreneur after entrepreneur, what you're going to find, so if we look at Sir Richard Branson, he wants to start an airline. Okay. Now to start the airline, you need a jumbo 747 that costs like $150 million.
The plane,
right? That's some serious money. Richard Branson got Virgin Atlantic off the ground with 0 and with 0 risk. So here's what he did. You replace capital with creative thinking. So he calls 206-555-1212, which is directory assistance in Seattle, Washington. And he asked for the phone number for Boeing. Okay, so he calls the main Boeing switchboard.
Boeing sell the planes, right?
Yeah, Boeing makes the 747. So he calls the main switchboard of Boeing, giant, huge company, and says, I'd like to lease a jumbo. And they hang up on him. Okay? He calls about 30 times. And they keep hanging up. And finally, they get tired of his calls. And the lady says, let me put you in touch with somebody who's in charge of leasing, and they can tell you to get lost. Okay, so she transfers him to a person who's actually leasing jumbos. This person tells Richard, says, look, Mr. Branson, in every country, we have one customer. And in the UK, that is British Airways. So we have nothing to talk about. So he said, well, just humor me for a second. He said, if British Airways called you and said that they wanted to lease an old used jumbo, do you have one lying around? So the guy said, as a matter of fact, we do, but that's academic. He said, well, what would you lease it to British Airways for? Just since we're having a conversation. What ended up happening is Boeing leased him that jumbo. And the reason they leased him the jumbo is they had one just sitting around. So they didn't really have any risk because they said the moment the guy doesn't make any payments, we're going to pull the plane, right? So now when you have an airline, you sell all the seats 4 months in advance. The cash has already come in. You pay for the fuel 30 days after the plane lands, and you pay for the lease after the plane lands. You don't need any capital. Virgin Atlantic got off the ground with 0 capital. Okay, now if you can start an airline which needs a jumbo with 0 capital, you can start any business with 0 capital. Okay, so basically, when you look at business after business after business, all of them, what they do is they start small, they're embryonic, they minimize risk, they get a few customers, and then after that, they just roll with the customers, right? And then that's how they get going. So the important thing is that when we take the blue out, when blue is no longer here,
which is work,
work is gone, yellow is going to almost double or triple, because this is where all the orgasmic activity is.
So we move the work, we quit the 9-to-5 job and we move that time over to working on our startup.
I was working on my startup like from 7 to 9 in the morning. And then I would come back 6 p.m. and work till 10 or 12 in the evening.
When you had a job?
When I had my job. And then I'd work on the weekends. And I was so desperate to just go full-time into it, because I just said, if you just let me go full-time, I can tear it up. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, in about first year, we did 400,000 revenue, second year, 1.4 million, third year, 3 million. And by the sixth or seventh year, we were at about 15, 17 million. It just grew because basically then I had no shackles on me. I could just go full out. Right. And the engine, I knew all the statistics of these letters, so many calls, so many this, so much this means this and all of that. And it works. So, and if it doesn't work, you can go back to your 9-to-5 and give it another shot, So you actually could do this a few times.
I think that's a really unappreciated framework, as you call it, or mental model, which is, because you said you sent 200 letters. So many times kids come up to me in the street and they say, look, I've been looking for a job. I've sent 6 emails.
Yeah.
And they go, no one's got back to me.
Yeah.
And you can see that it's hit their confidence. And now they've actually arrived at the conclusion that getting a job is like hard or impossible because they sent 6.
Yeah.
Now, when I interview people like you, they all give me much bigger numbers. They say 200, 300, 500, And there's something in this sort of law of averages, which is just like, just take more swings. You see it in like cricket.
My daughter, when she was graduating from Berkeley, came to me and I was really surprised. She said, I want to work at a hedge fund. And so I said, okay. And her degree was not in business. So she was not a natural candidate to be even considered. I said, can you make a list of every hedge fund in New York and LA and put it in Excel, managing partner's name, address. Now, we don't know people's email addresses, but we know everyone's mailing address. Okay, the mailing address is a public piece of data.
The address.
The address is easy, right? And I said that, so she got a list of about 1,200 funds in LA and New York. And I said, what you're going to do is, you're going to ask for the job, but you're going to have 2 pages behind that giving them a stock tip. You're going to give them a pitch that you have written up of a company that if they invest in, they're likely to make money. We sent the 1,200 letters, physical letters, okay? All physical letters, no email, right? And there's a 85-year-old guy in New York who gets the letter. He's retired. The fund doesn't exist. It shouldn't have been on the list, whatever. But he has a friend in LA. He says, hey, Jamie, aren't you looking for an analyst? And this girl, she seems to have the perfect kind of background. And she ends up with a higher salary than anyone who went to Berkeley Business School with a much higher GPA than hers.
I was thinking about what you're saying, and I made a video the other day, which I think is somewhat relevant, where I was trying to describe to people how to send a message to someone in a way that creates impact. And the framework that I came up with, which we'll animate on the screen, but is basically, so this axis here is the signal versus noise of the channel you're using. Mm-hmm. So a high signal channel is one where it gets past the PA, mm-hmm. It's less saturated, less busy. A high noise channel, which is the opposite, would be sending an email to the press@yourcompany.com's email.
Sure.
So everyone goes through that path and doesn't get to the person. And then the other axis is basically the emotional impact of the message.
Yeah.
So high emotional impact is doing what you said, put a stock tip in there. You're going to stand out. They're going to think you're a little bit strange. Or what you said about shortening the name, that creates more emotional resonance. And then low would just be AI slop, copy and paste jargon. And really the most successful messages are up here.
Absolutely.
high signal channel, high emotionally resonant.
Absolutely.
But what ends up happening is people send loads of messages down here, and then they get depressed and demotivated and say, no one's getting back to me.
Yeah. Like Michael Jordan used to say, you miss every shot you don't take.
Yeah.
So basically, it is, I think one of the things about entrepreneurs is that you need to have resilience. Like for me, what the data I was looking for is that if I send 5,000 letters, okay, which takes 25 weeks, 6 months, how many meetings does that end up in? If that ends up with 10 meetings or 20 meetings, well, now I have my number, right? And then the second part is the meeting to close ratio, right? And so to me as a math guy, I was just interested to know that it's not zero. Okay, I just want to make sure. And I could see very quickly it was not zero. Literally within the first 2-3 months, I could see it's not zero.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.